They were alive, but not recorded anywhere. This is the chilling story of a couple who arrived in England, only to find out they didn't exist in the one place it mattered most, on paper. They arrived quietly at a London airport. No one was waiting for them. No relatives to greet them, no welcome party to cheer them on. All they had were 2 suitcases, a printed address, and a powerful belief that once they landed on British soil, their new life would finally begin. They had no idea that in a country like England, your very existence depends on records. And without knowing it, they were already missing. When Ibrahim and Hawa left their home in Nigeria, they planned everything with meticulous care. They secured valid visas. They brought enough savings to last them for months. They had a short-term plan that they were confident would become permanent once things settled down. It was a classic immigrant story, filled with hope and careful preparation. Through a friend of a friend, they found a man who rented them a small flat. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The deal was simple: a cash deposit and cash rent every month. No problem, the landlord told them with a reassuring smile. It's just easier for everyone this way. At the time, it didn't sound like a red flag. It sounded like kindness, like someone cutting through the red tape to help them get on their feet. Ibrahim, driven and hardworking, found work almost immediately. He took on the night shifts, the warehouse jobs that most people avoided. It was cash in hand, the kind of work where no one asks too many questions. Hawa also found her rhythm, cleaning offices and private homes across the city. There were no payslips, no formal contracts. Just cash slipped into envelopes at the end of a long day. They told each other it was just temporary, a stepping stone. They were surviving, and for now that felt like enough. But then the first warning sign appeared, subtle but unsettling. Hawa felt unwell and decided to register with a local doctor. At the clinic, the receptionist sat behind a computer, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. She typed for a long time, then paused, her brow furrowed. She typed again. "I'm sorry," she said, finally looking up. "I can't find you." Hawa laughed, a little nervously. "But I'm right here," she replied, gesturing to herself. The receptionist didn't smile back. "You need proof of address," she said flatly. "A utility bill, a council tax statement, and proof of your status." Hawa left the clinic that day with a complicated form she did not understand and a growing sense of unease. Weeks turned into months. They noticed things, or rather they noticed the absence of things. The council tax letter that their neighbors complained about never arrived at their door. They never received an NHS number in the mail. No electoral registration forms, nothing. Their letterbox remained silent. At first, they felt lucky, as if they'd slipped through the cracks and were avoiding a few bills. But that feeling of luck slowly curdled into something else. It started to feel wrong. The turning point came one night when Ibrahim had a serious accident at work, a deep cut on his hand, the bleeding refusing to stop. He wrapped it in cloth, but the blood soaked through quickly. They rushed to the nearest A&E. A nurse took his details: name, address, NHS number. When Ibrahim admitted he didn't have an NHS number, the nurse frowned. The system was checked. They searched for his name, his date of birth, their address. Nothing. No GP registration. No council record. There was no trace of him living at that address at all. The hospital staff were professional. They treated his wound, stitched him up, and bandaged his hand. But just before they discharged him, a hospital security officer spoke to them quietly, away from the bustling waiting room. "We have a problem," the officer said, his voice low. "You're not in our system, anywhere." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Back in their small flat, a sense of dread began to creep in. Ashrain went through all their documents, frantically searching for an explanation. He checked old emails, scanned photos of their visas, looked at every piece of paper they had, and then he found something terrifying. The name their landlord had given them didn't match any official records. The flat number they lived in wasn't officially listed for that building. They weren't tenants in the eyes of the law. They were just occupants. Unregistered, unrecorded occupants. The world started to shrink around them. Howard tried to open a simple bank account to keep their savings safe. She was rejected. The reason? They couldn't verify her identity or address. Ibrahim applied for a national insurance number, a crucial step for legal work. He never received a response. Desperate, they went to the local council office in person, hoping to clear things up face to face. After waiting for hours, a tired-looking clerk finally called them forward. They explained their situation. The clerk typed, clicked, and stared at the screen. Finally, he shook his head. "There's no record you live here," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Howard's voice was barely a whisper. "But we do. We sleep there every single night." The clerk didn't even look up from his screen. Fear settled into their lives like a permanent resident. They stopped leaving the flat together, afraid that something might happen to one of them while they were alone. They stopped answering the door unless they were expecting someone, which they never were. Sleep became a luxury they could no longer afford. Every knock, every siren, every footstep in the hallway felt like a direct threat. And then they realized something far worse than being illegal immigrants. They were unverifiable. If something terrible happened to them, if one of them went missing, who would know? No employer would confirm they worked for them. No landlord would claim them as tenants. No government system would recognize their existence. They could simply disappear, and there would be no official record, no paper trail, no one to even begin a search. The moment it all broke came one cold night. Fire alarms blared through the building. The smell of smoke filled the stairwell, thick and acrid. Residents poured out into the street, panicked and coughing. Firefighters arrived, shouting instructions, calling out names from a resident list to make sure everyone was accounted for. Ibrahim and Hawa stood shivering in the cold, watching the chaos. An official with a clipboard approached them. "Which flat are you in?" he asked. When they told him their flat number, he frowned, scanned his list, then scanned it again. He looked at them, then back at the building. "I'm sorry," he said, "but according to our records, that flat doesn't exist." There were ghosts living in a phantom apartment. In the aftermath, they returned to a home that no longer felt safe, that no longer even felt real. Within a few weeks, they were gone. They left without giving notice, without leaving a forwarding address. One morning, the flat was simply empty. Neighbors later said they never even knew their names. In a country like England, if you are not recorded, you are not protected. You can work, you can breathe, you can love, you can suffer. But if you fall, there is no net to catch you. The most terrifying thing Ibrahim and Hawa learned wasn't that they were undocumented. It was that they were invisible. And invisible people can disappear without anyone ever asking why. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that makes you think.